This is your daily dose of all things royal.
Both found liable.
Wow. Yeah. And so to that point, now this is purely about the construction of the platform itself. It's not about outside actors. It's not about people exploiting the platform. It's about the actual making of the platform, that it itself was harmful and that they knew it.
Josh, sorry to interrupt you. Apparently the jury awards $3 million in damages to Kaylee GM. Now, this was a single plaintiff case as opposed to the New Mexico one, which was sort of a more generalized case, which was $5,000 penalty per violation, adding up to $375 million. So this is a single award of damages. Meta apparently liable for 70% of the damages, which would leave 30% to YouTube. So a $3 million award for Kaylee GM. How does that strike you, Josh?
Well, as far as, writing checks for these two huge multi-billion-dollar companies, it's nothing. But it's huge as far as what it means for all of the other plaintiffs. This is now blood in the water. They now understand that these companies are vulnerable, that Section 230 is not going to protect them, that these arguments work.
This is now blood in the water.
Nope, your eyes are not deceiving you. That is indeed James Holt. Yes, he was there for this landmark win, and Harry and Meghan have wasted no time to claim this win up on their Sussex.com website, titled Parents Win Over Platforms. Today's verdict in Los Angeles and yesterday's ruling in New Mexico are landmark victories for families, advocates, and young people everywhere, and a powerful message that justice has caught up to big tech. After years of denial and deflection, a jury has confirmed that parents and experts have said all along the harm isn't in parenting, it's in product design. The systems driving our social media platforms have been built to exploit, not protect, and accountability has finally arrived. The products, design choices, and business models at the center of this trial weren't theoretical. They were weaponized in ways that shaped how young people live, learn, and connect. This case pulled back the curtain on what we have long known. Profit is prioritized over protection, transparency is sacrificed for engagement, and the costs fall on children and families. In a stunning and unanimous decision, the jury found that Meta and Google were negligent, and that their negligence directly caused harm to a young woman known as Kaylee. Even more powerfully, the jury concluded that their actions were carried out with malice, oppression, or fraud. In other words, this wasn't an accident, it was a choice. The verdict is a bellwether, a social media warning label for the world. For the first time, a jury has said unequivocally that the way these platforms are designed can cause real harm and that companies knew about it. Their answers said it all. Yes, Meta and Google were negligent in the design or operation of Instagram and YouTube. Yes, the negligence was a substantial factor in causing harm to Kaylee. Yes, Meta and Google knew that the design or operation of Instagram and YouTube posed dangers when used by a child. Yes, Meta and Google knew that users would not fully recognize those dangers. Yes, Meta and Google failed to adequately warn users of the risks. Yes, a reasonable platform designer or operator would have provided warnings or guidance on safe use. Yes, Meta and Google's failure to warn was a substantial factor in causing harm to Kaylee. These findings apply to both Instagram and YouTube. They validate the truths so many families have spoken for years and prove in a court of law that the blame lies not with parents or children, but with platforms that engineered addiction and ignored warnings. Archwell Philanthropies is grateful to the families, experts, and advocates, and to the Parents Network, whose collective voice and shared strength have transformed grief into action for bringing this truth to light. Their courage in exposing what big tech refused to admit has changed the conversation about tech accountability forever. Now, this last piece is one of those I told you so moments. The floodgates are now open. There will be more cases, more demands for reform, and more insistence on responsibility. The question is no longer whether social media must change. It's when and how fast. Now, for those who have been religiously watching my videos, you'll recall that I did say that the reason why Harry and Meghan had been funding these law firms ever since they decided to pivot towards keeping the kids safe was because of this. If one of these cases broke, again, the floodgates would open, and here we are. Yesterday, I held off on talking about this because I knew that this verdict was coming today and figured that Harry and Meghan would do one write-up. But yesterday, Meta was fined $375 million in New Mexico over child exploitation claims.
In an unconscionable trade practice, the jury's answer is yes. Question 6. Did Meta act willfully by engaging in an unconscionable trade practice? The jury's answer is yes. Question number 7. In accordance with the civil penalty instruction and the instructions as a whole, how many willful violations did Meta commit by engaging in an unconscionable trade practice? The jury's answer is 37,000. Question 8. In accordance with the civil penalty instruction and the instructions as a whole, we determine that the civil penalty amount per violation in question number 7 should be as follows. And with a number between $0 and $5,000, the jury's answer is $5,000. Ladies and gentlemen, did I correctly read that verdict? Yes. All right.
So this verdict today is being reported, and you'll notice, by all the leftist media outlets as a landmark for child safety. The left doesn't give a shit about child safety. They just care about taking away your rights. What this means, it represents a significant legal mechanism now for dismantling anonymous internet access. You understand? Remember, I told you, Harry wants to take away people's privacy. They want to know who you are online. And because it's in the name of child safety, it's got bipartisan support, as well as Mark Zuckerberg's assistance. And we'll get to him in a second because news came out today that has me scratching my head. So what the attorneys did that made this case so special was they found a workaround Section 230. For those that don't know, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act largely shields these platforms from liability from what people are posting online. So instead, they used how these platforms were built. So infinite scroll, algorithmically amplified notifications, engagement loops, engineered to maximize a person's time on the site. So this argument treats social media architecture the way product liability law treats a car without brakes, a defective product that the public needs to be protected from. Now, you notice this theme. It's a similar theme that Meghan and Harry started back in October 2023 when she was at this mental health summit where she talked about seatbelts in the car, and she was like, beep, 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 whatever her word salad was. But this essentially was what Harry and Meghan were talking about. So you know that this is the narrative that they're now going to use to justify taking away not only your privacy, but also restrict your speech. So now, if this framing holds up on appeal, then the plaintiffs in over 1,600 similar cases waiting across the nation will suddenly have a tested legal theory, one that lets them bypass now Section 230 protections entirely. That would represent a structural change to how we handle liability on the internet. This is one driven by lawyers and a body of science on social media's effect on mental health that remains deeply contested, especially in this case where the girl that filed this lawsuit said she got hooked on social media at the age of 6. Now, at some point, you're going to have to bring the parents in and hold them responsible. We talked about this in prior videos. And all of this change is around this science that is genuinely disputed. Y'all recall how Meghan compared social media users to drug addicts like her husband. Now, the word addiction is making real waves, both legally and rhetorically. When social media gets labeled as a drug, access to it now stops being a personal choice and becomes a regulatory and medical issue that the government now needs to step in and fix, meaning deciding who gets to use it, under what conditions, and who gets verified. Suddenly, those questions now belong to the authorities, not the individuals with free will. So now here's the key point that I want to make here. If they're going to look at social media as an addictive product, regulating an addictive product and regulating speech should never be treated as the same thing, but in this case, it looks like they're moving in that direction. The surveillance infrastructure required to enforce either, though, it's identical. Identity verification, access controls, and a system that can follow users across every platform they touch. And now this brings us to Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg spent more than 5 hours testifying in Los Angeles Superior Court. When pressed on age verification, he told the jurors he didn't understand why it was so difficult, and his proposed solution is the detail that deserves our closest attention now. I mentioned this in my previous video. Multiple times in this hearing, Zuckerberg argued that verification shouldn't happen inside individual apps at all. Instead, it should happen at the operating system level, handled by the big tech gatekeepers like Apple and Google. He told the jury that operating system providers were better positioned to implement age verification tools since they control the software that runs most smartphones. Now, remember in that video that I did about that bill that was being introduced here in New York requiring that before you could even use your device, you have to verify who you are with, whether it be your biometrics or your passport, literally giving up all kinds of anonymity. Well, Zuckerberg is saying that doing it at the level of the phone is just a lot cleaner than having every single app out there have to do it separately. And he added that it would be pretty easy for them to implement. This isn't just a proposal to verify the ages of Instagram users. This is a proposal to verify the identity of every smartphone users. And if this bill in New York passes, every device connected to the internet. So essentially, if the device manufacturer, whether it be Apple or Google, own the age enforcement, then platforms like Meta are no longer responsible for it. The liability simply shifts to these other companies, and I'm sure that they're pleased about that. So essentially, two companies, Apple and Google, who are already facing serious antitrust scrutiny for their control of app distribution, would now suddenly be handed new authority as the identity gatekeepers for the entire internet. I don't know how warm and fuzzy you feel about that, but I sure don't, especially not with Google. So this little smarmy bitch, under oath, under pressure, handed a high-profile public endorsement to a national digital ID layer, built directly into the two operating systems that run the overwhelming majority of the world's smartphones. And we know that legislators in blue states like California and New York are chomping at the bits for this. Now, I'm hoping people are paying attention because this is some scary stuff. Age verification for lawful online speech right now is advancing in California without a clear constitutional answer. Then we have the COSA bill, which is still pending at the federal level. It would direct agencies to develop verification precisely at the device or operating system level. This is the exact same framework that Zuckerberg is proposing, which makes me now question this announcement that was made by Donald Trump. I was very disheartened to see this headline today, but it's true. Trump is about to name Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, and Jensen Huang to tech panel, meaning this group is going to advise the president on how to regulate artificial intelligence, among other issues. So if this be what Mark Zuckerberg is proposing, that we get down to the device level and you have to give up your anonymity, this concerns me. You know, Laura Loomer is right when she says, we went from Zuckerberg for prison to Zuckerberg now being appointed to President Trump's White House tech panel. So much for accountability. Zuckerberg deplatformed President Trump, censored his supporters, and then helped steal an election. What a slap in the face to MAGA. I agree here. Like, what is going on? Now, the reason why this is so concerning is when you look at the state level, like take, for instance, New York and the Safe for Kids Act. What they're permitting is facial analysis as an alternative to submitting government ID, along with the collection of biometric data just to access social media. And we all know it's not going to stop there. It's soon going to be access to your banking, and somehow it's going to be tied to the government as well as your health care. And all of these laws that are being laid down obviously are going to require an identity database. And who better than to have on board of this tech committee than Larry Ellison? So now with these identity databases being built, there's always the possibility of a breach. I mean, just last year, a Discord-related breach exposed approximately 70,000 government-issued IDs that had been submitted through a third-party system. I'm going to tell you this now. There is no network or infrastructure out there that's 100% bulletproof. It's not a question of if there'll ever be a security breach with whatever it is that they're building here. It's a question of when and how bad the impact will be. Every new ID check or vector creates another future breach just waiting to happen. Anonymous and pseudo-anonymous speech online protects real people. And we're talking whistleblowers, abuse survivors, political dissidents, individuals exploring sensitive medical questions or personal identities they're not ready to attach their legal names to just yet. And journalists of all people, protecting their sources. Mandatory identity verification at the operating system level would end all of that and do exactly what Prince Harry and Meghan have wanted, which was removing the anonymity of users online. We all know how dangerous Harry and Meghan are and what they would do with that information to harm others that talk about them. This is what scares me about all of this. We know how malicious Harry and Meghan are, which means there's other people out there who are equally as malicious, if not worse. Now, if the stated goal is to protect children from Instagram, we'll get off of Instagram. Yeah, at this point, I think people need to start taking a stand and start deleting their accounts off of Facebook and Instagram and show these tech companies that they are nothing without the people, and the people don't want this. And now with this judgment, even if they do appeal and they do win, they're still going to use this as an example and an excuse to go ahead and push these regulations. That's why this was such a disappointment today. So when you put this in perspective, the chain from these verdicts to a full surveillance architecture runs through one single word, and that's addiction. Declare a public health emergency based on that classification, and emergency powers follow. Age verification follows from those emergency powers. And this was something that Harry and Meghan, when you look at this military-grade censorship operation that they have been running for the last 6 years, and the psychological harm that they have caused, was all intentional to get us to this point to where they are eroding our constitutional rights. And so many people have yet to wake up to realize that slowly but surely, bit by bit, more and more of our freedoms are being taken away. And it's infuriating because for the last 6 years, this couple has caused so much psychological harm to people. What they were doing, I don't understand why the government hasn't expelled this guy yet or held them to account. It's not like the U.S. government doesn't know. They know. Trust me on this one. And what's really frustrating is that yesterday, monumental win with the Missouri versus Biden that nobody seems to be talking about. So yesterday, Senator Eric Schmidt announced the long-running Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, which accused the Biden regime of pressuring social media companies to censor Americans' posts on topics like COVID-19, the Hunter Biden laptop story, election issues, and other stuff. The case has now been resolved through a binding 10-year consent decree that prohibits key federal agencies, including the U.S. Surgeon General, CDC, and CISA, from threatening, coercing, or strong-arming social media platforms to suppress, remove, deplatform, or bury constitutionally protected speech. Senator Schmidt, who launched the suit as Missouri's Attorney General, described it as the first real operational restraint on the federal censorship machine, marking a significant win for First Amendment rights and protecting ordinary Americans from government overreach in online speech. This decree now provides enforceable limits on how these agencies can interact with tech companies regarding content moderation. So in a way, it really doesn't solve anything because you still have these NGOs who will do the bidding for the government. And that's where I think we need more emphasis and focus on to eliminate the power that is getting outsourced by the government to do the dirty work. But nevertheless, it's still a win. However, overshadowed by the wins from yesterday and today with these so-called social media lawsuits. Now, many of you know, if you've been following this with me, that a whole reason for this focus on keeping the kids safe from online harms is because of this lawsuit, the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit. Harry and Meghan and the whole cabal of Democrats all knew that they were violating Americans' First Amendment rights, but they didn't care. And once they got called out, they quickly pivoted to focusing on the kids. And now, you see, it's become the Trojan horse to take away even more freedoms. You can't hate these people enough, man. You just can't. And in Tom Bauer's new book, it does give us a peek into how calculated Meghan was and the theme of what it was going to be with these two. It says, the report of Meghan's 45-minute visit to the headquarters of the College of Arms located since 1555 in London's Queen Victoria Street confirmed the establishment's worst fears. On the Queen's orders, Meghan, the new Duchess of Sussex, was to have her own coat of arms. The design would be supervised by Thomas Woodcock, the Garter Principal King of Arms. Meghan's arrival in Woodcock's office was unexceptional. Every newly created peer visited to discuss his or her title and every aspect of Britain's heraldry for their elevated position. The Californian had entered into an alien world of ancient British families, chivalry, and their symbols. She would have been surprised to hear that Woodcock's annual salary, set in 1618, was just £47, reduced from £100. Woodcock's task was to prevent any embarrassments, but Meghan's request was unprecedented. Convinced that she had been created a duchess in her own right, unrelated to Harry being the Duke, she told Woodcock, "I want on the coat of arms a songbird with its tongue cut out." Woodcock was flummoxed. Any hint of nostalgia was quashed by her moral certitude. The Duchess eventually agreed to a nightingale, but without the image of it being forcibly silenced. In my opinion, this woman was calculated from the word go and what her mission with Harry was going to be in the United States. And now here we are. We're now losing more and more of our civil rights as a result of these two assholes. Just my opinion. But what do you guys think? I'll be back tomorrow with talking about this book more in depth. So stay tuned. Make sure that you're subscribed and you hit that like button. But I'll be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.